Ottawa has quietly renewed one of the most contentious issues in federal-provincial relations, the equalization formula. Finance Minister Bill Morneau's office says the existing formula will remain as is until 2024. Some provinces say they were caught unawares by the move. Nick Gamache is in Ottawa. Good morning.
Good morning, Heather. Well, it's not the first time that we've heard rumblings about disagreements over the equalization program. It's been a source of tension between especially half provinces that don't get anything from the equalization program, and the federal government. And the provinces benefiting from the equalization payment, and we can see them, and you can see that Quebec gets the lion's share of the equalization payment. So there has been tension before. You're talking about a lot of money, $19 billion, and it's supposed to address disparities across the country so that everyone across the country could get similar access to services. What Ottawa is saying now is that it's going to be extended by 5 years. The extension kicks in April until 2024. It was passed as part of the budget implementation bill. And what they're saying in Bill Morneau's office is that provinces were aware this was coming. It's been discussed with them, but that doesn't mean that everyone's happy. Alberta, Saskatchewan saying they don't like the status quo. They would like to talk about it, and they plan to bring it up next week when the finance ministers meet.
And objections to the status quo, Nick, pretty much come down to one word, don't they? Fairness.
That's right. Because of the way equalization works, you either get it or you don't. There's no in between. And because of the way it's calculated, because of the way non-renewable resources revenues are factored in, provinces like Saskatchewan and Alberta, even when oil prices went down, for example, remained half provinces. And the Premier of Saskatchewan, Scott Moe, is saying that doesn't work. We should change that. And he's pushed forward a different kind of approach.
Half of the total equalization pool would be distributed using the existing formula. The other half of the pool would be dispensed on a per capita basis. This would ensure that all provinces receive some funding from the equalization program.
Now, the difficulty is that you can't separate the politics from all of this. We saw it earlier. Quebec gets a lot of money out of this. So if you change the way the pie is divided, you would take money away from Quebec. And politically, that is a difficult thing to do. And I should mention, too, that despite what some provinces are saying, that they're not happy, there is no sign right now that Ottawa would be even willing to entertain the idea of changing the equalization program.
Issues in federal...
Good evening, YouTube. Good evening, my fellow Canadians. If you're watching this, I thank you for your time and attention. Tonight, the issue of equalization caught me off guard. I was listening on the radio to the Rob Breckenridge show. He's a radio talk host here in Calgary, and an individual that, well, we'll get into him in a minute. But one of his callers brought up the idea of ending equalization, the policy of equalization in Canada. And of course, he's motivated by the same topic they talk in this video, by fairness. Many of you know about the equalization, I'm sure. The so-called policy of have-not provinces. Here's my issue with it. This clip brought up a few things. Firstly, the equalization totals $19 billion, give or take, I think. And the government, as I understand it from that program, is renewing the payment program that will be in effect until for 5 years until the year 2024. According to this program, this was released in 2018. So we're now 2019. We've got, actually we do have 5 years to go. So we're still good there. What we didn't know that they sort of said quickly is that this particular payment was passed on a budget implementation bill. For those of you who do not know, a budget bill is always passed regardless of the wording and the bills within that bill. To vote a budget bill down is like the same as a vote of non-confidence for the government. So you can say whenever Justin Trudeau tries to pass something that the House would consider particularly reprehensible or require more discussion, but he wants to get it done, he'll pass a bill like that. He'll put all those little nasty bills within a finance bill, and his whole party will vote for it, and it will get passed. He did the same thing on SNC Lavalin to give his support staff, let's call it, more power enough to begin the process to allow SNC to get off their criminal charges after Jody Wilson-Raybould was kicked out of caucus. So, getting back to this, I'm sorry about going on a tangent there. In addition to it being unfairly proportioned, as you can see there, with Quebec taking the lion's share, as he said, $11.732 billion. In addition to that, to remind you, the fact that a province has non-renewable resources, and that is factored into the formula and recalculated, meaning that Alberta and Saskatchewan and British Columbia, for a start, don't get equalization. So, that aside, we're still considered a half province in Alberta because of our connections to the energy sector and whatnot. So what Scott Moe was proposing is that we'll go by a per capita basis, because as far as we can tell here in Alberta, Eastern Canada, especially, well, I don't want to get into the details, but especially the Trudeau government, are trying to kill our pipelines, as many of you know, and trying to kill the energy sector as we know it, significantly reduce or phase out, whatever terminology you want. They don't want that business sector to grow at all. They want to reduce it. So just so long as that's clear. So in spite of this, Alberta is not allowed to conduct business effectively, and we're losing business, I might add, even though assets change hands all the time. We're not gaining any business. And I can also say potential business is not looking at Canada at all. They're going to go somewhere safer, like the United States, for example. And what Scott Moe is proposing is per capita. So obviously, because the oil sands haven't been operating at full capacity, because we can't get a pipeline built, the per capita in these provinces, at least Alberta and Saskatchewan, has gone way down. So in that instance, if the program could be revised in that way, we actually would be receiving some form of equalization, just because the terms of have and have not would be renegotiated and redefined and so on. So mostly I'm looking at Quebec is hoarding the pie, I could say. No offense to any Quebecers. I mean you no disrespect, but the numbers stand as they are. Quebec gets a substantial amount of the equalization, above 50%. And the second place would be Manitoba, at least according to these figures. So all I'm saying is that I'm trying to look at this dispassionately, because Trudeau is elected and there's nothing that we can do. His policies toward the pipeline stand to me transparent. I have a feeling that he will delay TMX as long as possible. I mean, they might keep trying to lead the people on, and maybe at the end of 4 years, maybe the pipeline might get built, but for those of you who know Trudeau, he says one thing and does another. He's a perfect liar, and I can't say it any other way. That's the way he is. But that aside, I was trying to figure out ways at which I can do it, not accusing him so much, but how things could be easier to manage in the next 4 years for each of the provinces. So I'm thinking, like, equalization really needs some debate. I was looking at this professor here. Not a professor. David McKinnon, who studied it according to that YouTube video for about 30 years, and his focus was on in Ontario, and he said, Ontario is just getting screwed over, if I may say so. And he was looking at it from that perspective and so on, and he wanted to see a revision of the equalization program like yesterday. That aside, he kept saying that the terms of equalization and the benefits and the impacts of its implementation had not been measured for 50 years accurately. So the data on it is nearly null, except for his investigations and whatnot. But I think he was a pioneer in that sense, exploring his own ground. But I would like to see, and I try to make this as nonpartisan as I can and apolitical as I can. We need to have a very close examination of the equalization program itself and a revision of the have and have-nots to all of Canada will share it. That's what needs to happen. When I look at this map, again, no offense to Quebec, the pie is not balanced. According to population, I suppose that calculates into the formula about how much you receive, but I cannot be sure of that. That's just what I heard off reading a little bit about the equalization program here and there. But being not in government, I cannot tell you the exact parameters in which the formula is calculated. What I do know is that Quebec benefits greatly, and I say not only Quebec but Manitoba, and so never mind that. Forget the current figures. Let us debate and redefine, revise this whole equalization policy so that the entire country benefits. And the formula itself, I would say, is biased toward Quebec because that's who receives the biggest benefits. I would like to see a revision in which every province would receive roughly the same amount. But that's just a superficial analysis. I mean, what I hope is that many of you will look at it, comment, correct me if I'm wrong, and then add your ideas so that we can figure out together what would be a more perfect solution for the equalization program. That's where it's got to start. I can introduce the idea to you, but many people, I know you are, a lot of your opinions, I enjoy reading it, and I like you to comment on this because this is a problem facing all of us. But again, I would like the terms of equalization to be revised and changed and redefined, the formula to be more, as Scott Moe asked for, the per capita basis per each province. That should be taken into consideration. Like the entire formula is wrong. It has to be revised. The discussion about equalization should be revised. Another thing is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Quebec collects its own taxes and kicks back to the federal government what they wish. But I don't know if that's hearsay or if that's actually the truth. So correct me if I'm wrong, and please comment below if you know the answer to that question. And in addition, because Quebec has a great deal of voters, a great deal of votes, it would be political suicide, so to speak. They didn't say that, but between the line, political suicide to try to introduce the idea to Quebec to get the funding somewhat more balanced. So that aside, I leave it to you. This proposal, it really bothered me because this caller was just up in arms against Rob Breckenridge, but he brought up some very, very valid points, which is that the equalization program itself is flawed in its current form. And it needs discussion. It needs fairness to the, well, first of all, there should not be terms as have and have not provinces. That's a very divisive term. Look at how half the country is ignored, so to speak. But that aside, I do believe that the equalization requires a very close examination and a complete, either a termination of that program and then a new program can begin with proper terms and proper parameters that will be fair to each province and territory and so on in this country. And what can I say? I want all Canadians to share from the pie, so to speak. It's 19 billion. It's it's not nothing. It's a substantial amount of collected tax dollars, and I would love it if this government, this government who's been reelected, would sit down and have a talk about fairness for this country. So I thank you for your time and attention, and take care. Bye-bye.